Hello and welcome. I hope that you're all doing well. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of keys in MySQL to give you a better understanding of how we can relate tables together with each other before we go on to discuss ways that we can explicitly link them together using things like joins. So let's go over to MySQL and take a look at keys. So when we're taking a look at the structure of the table, I've simply just clicked on products here, and then I click on structure. You could see that there's an option down here called primary, which has a key associated with it. Inside of SQL and relational databases overall, it's good convention to always have what is called a primary key. A primary key is a unique identifier for a particular record or row in a table. So when we think about our product example here, the product ID acts as a unique identifier. No matter what happens, the product ID is always going to be unique. Now, in addition to this, the product ID is also always going to be present. So there's always going to be a product ID, and it's always going to be unique. And these are the properties of a primary key. A primary key is any value in our database that is guaranteed to be unique and also guaranteed to be available and present in the table itself. So what we could do is we could say that product ID is a primary key. So I could just simply check this checkbox and press primary. And this will create a primary key inside of our table. So what this really does is it makes it so that the ID cannot be duplicated. So if I try to insert a value that already exists, so I insert like an ID of 1 in this case, since there's already something with an ID of 1. If I try to insert something like 1 or 2 again, it will give me an error. It will say you can't insert this because it violates the primary key constraint. So all it does is it guarantees that product ID will remain as a unique value, and it will not ever be null. So it will always be present in our table. The reason why we do this is because if I want to relate this table to another table, I need to be able to have something similar between the two tables. And the most logical thing to create a similarity between two tables would be a primary key. It would be something that is unique, since it would uniquely identify each row, which allows me to efficiently link them together. Now, before I go on to discuss that idea further, I just want to note that a primary key does not need to be just one column. It can actually be a combination of multiple columns. So for example, we could have said the product ID and the product name, when combined together, makes a unique value. That is something that may be required. And that happens in some situations like, a very simple scenario would be first names and last names, right? Someone could have the same first name as someone. For someone to have the same first name and last name would be less common. So we could say that the first name and last name might be unique when combined together in certain situations, right? So this is something to keep in mind, is that sometimes we need multiple columns, sometimes we just need one column. So that's possible to have multiple columns or one column as our primary key. Now with our primary key, we can link tables together. And when we have a table that references another table's product ID, or primary key rather, we call this a foreign key. So if a key in one table references another, that is called a foreign key relationship, because the keys are referencing a different table, right? So to show you an example of this sort of idea, let me create a new table called orders. And I'll do this in SQL because it would be a bit easier to show you. So let's create a table. And I call it orders. And what I'm going to say is that every single order is going to have an order ID that's going to be unique. And it's going to have a product ID associated with it. And that product ID is going to link into this products table. So the way that I do this is I say order ID, which I'm just going to declare as a varchar of 100. Again, that's text of size 100 or less. And then what we could do is we can say, actually, I'm just going to quickly change this name to orders. Order is actually a keyword in SQL, so we should use orders instead. So we have the order ID as a varchar, and then we're going to have the product ID, which is also going to be a varchar of size 100. It's going to be the same product ID as the one in the products table. So first off, let's specify that order ID is a primary key. The way we do that is we say primary key order ID. So this will make order ID our primary key. And now at this point, we also have to make a foreign key. So the way that we would do this is we would say the following. We would say comma and then foreign key product underscore ID references product products, product underscore ID. So what this is saying is it's saying order ID is a primary key, which means it's a unique identifier. And then product ID is a foreign key, which means that the product ID in this orders table is the same product ID as the one inside of the products table. This is creating a relationship between the two tables. Orders is related to products because orders has the same product ID as products does. What this allows me to do is it allows me to say, okay, suppose we have an order that has a product ID of 1. If I want to figure out which product that is, I can go to the products table and say what product has a product ID of 1, and it will give me all that information. Do you see how that creates a relationship between them? By linking the product IDs together, we can use the product ID to look up a product in the products table based on what is shown in the orders table. That's the way that we're creating these relationships together. So this gives you a little bit of an understanding of primary and foreign keys. Of course, when we create this table, we now have a new table called orders, and this has our primary and foreign key. And we can insert data into it. There's nothing really special about inserting data into this. So you can insert it to orders, values. As long as the product ID exists, that's all that really matters. And remember that the order ID also has to be unique. So say we have an order for product ID 1 and an order for product ID 2, we can insert those into the tables. Now, one final note that I'll make here is you'll notice that I didn't put the columns into the orders when I did the insert into. It's possible to not declare the columns. And when you do this, what SQL will assume is it will assume that you're giving values for all of the columns. So you really only have to specify the columns when there is one that you are excluding. If you're going to include all of them all the time, then you cannot include the columns there. Just wanted to note that based on what I did. So now at this point, we have the orders here, and the orders has this product ID, which references this products table, right? So we have this relationship between them now. And that's really all I wanted to set up in this video. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can take advantage of these relationships to join the data information together to display more complex sets of data. So that's what we'll take a look at in the next video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.